At the far end of my village, right where the old bamboo grove sways with the wind, there's an ancient well my great-grandfather once warned about. Don't go near it. Honestly, everyone in this village knows about that well. It has no pulley, no roof, and nobody has drawn water from it since before I even knew how to run around naked in the yard. The elders call it the bottomless stone well. It may sound like a joke, but there's a reason that name has lasted this long. I still remember, when we were kids, around 12 or 13 years old, we used to play soccer on the dirt field near the temple. Every time the ball flew toward the bamboo grove, nobody dared to fetch it. Once, Ty got forced to go, and he grumbled, "You guys are so superstitious. It's just a well. I've walked by there so many times and never saw a damn thing." But even he didn't dare to step all the way in. And we'd just say, "Yeah, maybe you don't see it, but the well sees you." That's just how rural rumors work. One person says a thing, 5 others add details, 10 whisper it around, and by the time it settles in your gut, it's a spine-chilling tale. But when it came to that well, no one really dared to joke. My dad once said that when he was young, someone tried to lower a stone-tied rope into it and never hit the bottom. When they pulled it back up, the stone was still there, but the rope was freezing cold like it had been dipped in ice. Some women claimed that walking by at night, they'd hear a child crying or the sound of trickling water, even when the whole area was bone dry during droughts. There's one story nobody forgets: the death of Mr. Kwong, the bricklayer. He was a tough guy with a booming voice, always short-tempered. I still remember what he said: "I don't believe in any of that ghost crap. All nonsense to scare kids." Then one sunny morning, he carried a rope and a chunk of stone to that well, saying, "I'll measure it for you all. Show you how deep it really is." He lowered the rope while smoking, his face all scrunched up. About halfway through the rope, he took a long drag, then suddenly let go. The rope dropped into the well with a whoosh. Then silence. No splash, no thud, nothing. He stood frozen for a few seconds, then turned around and walked home without a word. That night, his house was filled with incense smoke from front door to back. His wife said he sat in the corner all night, knees hugged to his chest, whispering. Someone pulled back. I saw it clearly. The next morning, he was found dead right at the doorstep, face down, gripping something like a torn shirt, with a rotten, earthy stench. His death silenced the whole village for months. No one dared mention the well, they just called it vaguely, "that place." Gradually, weeds covered the area, and no one went near. Once, during a village meeting, someone suggested sealing the well, but every time they tried to dump dirt in, it would pour rain like crazy. Thunder cracking the sky. People were terrified. Old man Moy, who was over 90 at the time, tapped his cane on the ground and said, "Someone lives in that well. If they won't let you close it, don't touch it." After Mr. Kwong's death, we all grew up and avoided that spot like the plague. But once, me and Hao, my childhood best friend, dared to get close. It was the summer of my 10th grade year. The rain had just stopped. The sky was gloomy, and the village was drenched in the smell of wet earth and grass. I don't know what pushed us, but we rode our bikes around and ended up turning toward the bamboo grove. I asked, "Hey, is it true someone really died in that well?" Hao scoffed. "Of course someone died. My grandma told me someone fell in ages ago. Vanished, never found. But the weird thing is, someone in the village dreamt they heard their name being called from underground." I got goosebumps. "Cut it out. Man, that's creepy as hell. Let's go." But he crept closer. He leaned over to peek inside. "Pitch black, can't see a damn thing," he muttered. But right as he said that, the wind picked up. The smell of damp earth and moss hit our faces. It wasn't strong, but I swear, it felt like breath. Before I could say anything, Hao sprang back, pale as a sheet. I heard something, like someone sighed in there. Then he bolted. That night, Hao had a fever. Not serious, no hallucinations, but he lay there mumbling. So cold down there, so dark, someone's sitting at the bottom. The next morning, he woke up and said nothing more. Never went near that well again. Just sometimes, while smoking, he'd mutter, "I thought it wasn't real, but turns out." I grew up, went off to school and work far away. Every time I come back and pass by that old bamboo grove, I still get chills. The well is still there, covered in moss. No one talks about it. No one touches it. But sometimes, at dusk, when birds fly home and the wind blows through, I hear the sound of trickling water, when there's not a single stream around. I'm not saying you have to believe me, but if one day you come to my village, walk past a weathered bamboo grove, and see a round well mouth covered in green moss, just don't lean over. Because who knows, someone down there might be looking back up at you. The story I'm telling today isn't as dramatic as being possessed or as gory as a horror movie. But everyone in my village remembers it, especially the folks who live near Uncle Hisus' jackfruit orchard. His jackfruit trees have been around for ages, since his great-grandfather's time. Now each tree has a trunk as thick as a stone mortar. Their canopies dense, branches heavy with fruit. When the jackfruit ripen, the sweet scent fills the air all the way from the end of the village. But because the orchard is so deep and shady, as evening comes, it gets oddly still, especially along the narrow path that runs beside it. Anyone passing there at dusk often feels like someone's walking right behind them. But when they turn around, there's no one. Uncle Hi has a rough temper. He always talks in a gruff tone. And if someone dares steal a jackfruit from his orchard, he curses them out from their ancestors down to their grandchildren. Still, he lives an honest life, no dark rituals, no spirit worship. Back when I was in 10th grade, he once told me a story he'd repeated 3 times in his life. Every time, he was dead serious, so much so that I thought he might be possessed himself. He said, "I'm not superstitious, but this jackfruit orchard, I'm not the only one living here." I asked, "What do you mean by that?" He looked around, then pointed toward the tree near the edge of the pond. That spot. Every night, a white figure walks from there into the orchard. Moves real slow, not in a hurry, never looks at anyone. The strange thing is, it only shows up when the jackfruit start ripening. Every jackfruit season, I see it. I thought he was messing with me. I asked, "So did you ever go closer to check?" He smirked and said, "I'm not stupid. The kind of thing that's clearer from far away always vanishes when you get close. You want to provoke it into showing itself or something? That orchard doesn't seem strange in the daytime. Kids go in to play. Villagers pass through to pick wild greens. Some even climb trees to take unripe jackfruit and sell at the market. But once it hits 5 in the afternoon, silence falls. No footsteps, no chatter. Even dogs don't run past there anymore. One time, I came home late and had to take a shortcut through the orchard. The moment I stepped onto the path, it felt like something tugged at my feet. It wasn't a stumble, not a cramp, more like my legs just couldn't lift. My neck chilled. I froze and looked around. No one, but strangely, even though the wind was blowing from ahead, I felt something, like a faint breath on the back of my neck. I bolted, ran straight home, drenched in sweat. My mom saw how pale I was and asked what happened, but I didn't dare tell her. From then on, I never took that path at dusk again. If I had to, I'd bring someone along, talk the whole way just to push back that cold creeping feeling. The scariest rumors started the year Mrs. Bay Lone passed away. She lived alone and sold fried bananas at the market. Her house was right next to the orchard. People said that every night, she'd sit under a jackfruit tree, lighting incense and praying. One time, a neighbor asked, "Who are you praying to?" She just smiled and said, "An old acquaintance." A few weeks later, she was found dead in her house, sitting cross-legged like in meditation, eyes wide open, arms wrapped tightly around an old, faded photo of a young woman in a white dye, long hair covering her face, standing behind a man who, when looked at closely, was her late husband. After that, the village elders gathered to discuss fencing off the orchard, hanging lights, and setting up a small altar near the old jackfruit tree by the pond. A local spiritual practitioner came to check the area. He pointed at that tree and said, "Someone was buried here, no name, no mention, but the soul still lingers." Everyone went pale. My Aunt Ba, who goes to the market early every day, getting up at 3 a.m., told me that one morning, as she passed by the orchard, she saw a white figure standing among the trees. Back turned, she thought it was someone stealing jackfruit and shouted, "Hey, who's that? The jackfruit aren't ripe yet." No reply. She stepped closer, just a few feet away, and the figure was gone. All that was left was a jackfruit with a few fresh claw marks, like someone had just tried to rip it off and stopped midway. She came home shaken, hands trembling as she told the story. She said she never saw the face, but standing there, it felt like being right behind someone you're not allowed to speak to. Since then, every time she passes by, she whispers a little prayer: "If you're real, forgive me. If you're not, please don't follow." Uncle Hai still lives there, still guards the jackfruit trees, still yells like crazy whenever someone tries to steal one. But ever since Mrs. Bay died, he no longer sleeps in the hut inside the orchard. He moved back into his main house, away from the jackfruit grove. I asked, "Were you scared?" He growled, "Not scared, just can't sleep. Every night I hear footsteps. Not heavy, not rushed, just one step at a time, right by my ear." He didn't say more, and I didn't ask again. The orchard is still there. When jackfruit season comes, people still eat, still sell, but that path beside the orchard, still empty after dark. Anyone passing through walks a little faster, holds their breath a little longer, as if someone is walking alongside them. Not pushing, not touching, just always a few steps behind. I don't know who that white shadow is, or where it came from, but I believe there are some who once lived here, once loved this land, these trees, and left quietly, with no one to say goodbye, no one to remember their names. They don't mean harm, they just stayed behind. In my village, everyone knows about the abandoned house out in the middle of the rice fields, sitting all alone among the endless paddies and canals. It's not the kind of house that was left behind due to poverty, nor is it one that burned down and scared people off from rebuilding. No, this house has solid brick walls, a tiled roof, shuttered windows. It's just that no one lives there. For years, whether it's planting season or harvest, villagers pass by but always turn their faces away. And the strange thing is, abandoned houses are supposed to fall apart, right? But this one still stands like it was built just last year. My grandma, when she was still alive, used to say, back when I was a young woman, that house belonged to Mr. Tu Phuoc, the wealthiest landowner in the area. He had 2 kids, the eldest daughter, beautiful like a flower, and the youngest son, smart and studious. But one day, during a heavy storm, both of them died, suddenly. No accident, no illness. The next morning, people found their bodies lying side by side in the back annex of the house, like they had fallen asleep in each other's arms. After that, Mr. Tu went mad. He'd sit alone all day in the fields, talking to himself. Then one day, he left the village and never came back. That was more than 40 years ago. The old folks have mostly passed, and the younger generation doesn't know the full story, only what's been passed down by word of mouth. But one thing hasn't changed. No one dares to pass that house at night. I used to half believe it, half dismiss it, until one day I rode with Try, a guy who works the fields for hire. That day, we finished tilling the soil late, and the sky suddenly darkened with light rain falling. The 2 of us were riding a motorbike home across the field. As we passed that house, the bike suddenly stalled. No engine, no lights, completely dead. Try cursed. What the hell? What's wrong with this damn bike? He kicked. I pushed. We struggled for 5 whole minutes, but it wouldn't budge. Then I heard a soft hiss, like wind slipping through a crack in the wooden door. I turned and saw the door of the back annex gently swaying. Even though the wind was barely there, it moved rhythmically, like someone slowly opening and closing it. Open, close, open, close. Try muttered through clenched teeth. This is bad luck. Let's just push it out of here. We shouldn't linger. I didn't argue. The bike wouldn't start, so we walked it. But as soon as we got about 20 steps away from the shadow of that house, the engine roared back to life and ran smoothly, like nothing had ever happened. From that day on, I believe there's something not right about that house. Not the kind of thing that jumps out in your face, but something cold, like standing near a place where no one welcomes your presence. Villagers say that the back room, where the 2 children died, has a floor that never dries. No matter how blazing the sun, it always feels damp, like it's just been wiped down. Sometimes, you can even see faint footprints, like someone recently walked barefoot. One farmer once stopped by to rest in the shade after work. He lay there for maybe 20 minutes, and when he got home, he fell sick for 3 straight weeks. No clear cause. At night, he'd murmur names in his sleep, names that didn't exist in the family registry. Aunt Tam, who sells lottery tickets at the village gate, once passed by at noon. She saw the door slightly open and stepped in to cool off. She later said, "I clearly saw a pair of slippers placed neatly by the door, brand new. Not a speck of mud. But who lives there to leave slippers?" She sat down on the doorstep, and before she could even get comfortable, she heard footsteps inside, soft, slow, unmistakably real. Flip-flop, flip-flop. She panicked, got up to run, but then a soft, hazy voice called out, "It's hot out there, stay inside." She ran without looking back. When she told the story, everyone got goosebumps. After that, she stopped selling tickets for a few months. Lost weight, dark circles under her eyes like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Once, I dared to go back to that house in broad daylight. I brought 2 friends, tough types. We entered through the front, stepping over a mossy porch, the smell of old wood hitting our noses. Inside, the house was empty, layers of dust everywhere, but strangely clean. No cobwebs, no rat droppings. The tiled floor still had a faint shine, as if someone had swept just the day before. We headed toward the back annex. One side of the wooden door had collapsed, and the inside was pitch black, even though it was bright and sunny outside. I shone my phone's flashlight and saw the floor really was damp. Water stains everywhere, never drying. There were also faint footprints, small, delicate, barefoot, like those of a young girl. Light, slender, and deeply chilling. One of my friends leaned in and asked, "Hey, the footprints go in, but they don't come out." I looked again. He was right. They led inward, with no return path. The 3 of us stood frozen. Then suddenly, all of our phones blacked out at the same time. Screens went completely dark. We didn't say a word, just turned and ran, our hearts pounding. Once we got outside the gate, our phones lit up again, working like normal. Since then, none of us ever went back. That house still stands there, alone in the peaceful rice fields. At noon, under the blazing sun, it still feels like someone's watching from inside. No gore, no screaming, but everyone passing by always walks just a bit faster. Every harvest season, people still whisper about seeing a faint yellow light flickering in the window of that annex room, even though no power lines have run out to that house in decades. Every year in my village, we hold an ancestral offering ceremony at the communal temple on the full moon of the first lunar month. The villagers call it the Thanksgiving to the ancestors, but the old men say it's actually to settle the unfinished matters of the previous year. That might sound strange, but anyone who's lived here long enough knows the temple is not a place to joke around, especially during the ceremony. The banyan tree in front of the temple is over 100 years old. Its trunk is so wide it takes 3 people to wrap their arms around it. and its roots stretch out like snakes sunbathing. Some say banyan roots feed the soil, but they also hold on to things unseen. Every time the ceremony comes around, old Mr. Moi Tam, the temple keeper, always repeats the same line: "Don't stand near the banyan during the ritual. If you're not part of it, leave the temple grounds before the incense touches the altar." That year, the spring rain had just ended. The air was still cold. Mist hovered above the rice stalks. I was assigned to help clean the altar before the ceremony, along with 3 others: Uncle Ba Loi, Mr. Tri the carpenter, and Tam, the son of the village chief. Tam spoke without thinking. "Why be scared of some ceremony? You believe. It works, you don't. It doesn't. It's not like ghosts show up at night to watch us." Uncle Ba shot him a look. "Watch your mouth. Kid, I once saw someone standing behind that banyan with no shadow. See the sunlight? It shines from the east. Everyone casts a shadow except for that one guy. Standing plain as day, but no shadow." Tam snorted. Maybe he was just standing in a shaded spot. Uncle Ba said nothing more. Just took a long drag on his cigarette and quietly continued wiping down the altar table. The ceremony began at high noon. People offered incense, whispered their prayers. The offering trays were full: betel, areca, incense, candles, nothing missing. Old Mr. Moi Tam read along, drawn-out prayer, his voice trembling like someone whispering to someone who wasn't there. Suddenly, the wind died. The village dogs stopped barking. Birds went silent. You could hear every single word of the prayer. As the final line of the prayer was spoken, the 3 incense sticks in the center of the altar suddenly curled into arcs, their tips glowing red as if touched by flame. Tam, standing next to me, tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Hey, do you hear that hissing sound?" I nodded. It wasn't normal wind. It sounded more like teeth grinding. But from far away, I turned my head, and my eyes happened to sweep past the banyan tree. It was just past 1 in the afternoon. The sun was high. Shadows stretched from east to west. There were over a dozen people in the courtyard, and each one had a shadow cast on the stone tiles. But near the banyan, at the edge of the courtyard, there was a man wearing a brown traditional tunic and a headscarf, standing still like a statue. The strange part, he had no shadow. I closed my eyes, thinking I was imagining things. Opened them again, and he was still there. I pulled Tam's arm. "Look, over there. By the banyan tree." "Who is that?" He turned to look, and froze. His face turned pale. *T. He's standing like a statue. Man, not moving. And no shadow. We were about to tell Mr. Tri when Uncle Ba muttered, "He's here. He comes every year. Don't turn around anymore. Just close your eyes and keep praying." Then he sat down and bowed deeply, mumbling something over and over under his breath. After the ceremony ended, everyone cleaned up and quietly avoided looking toward the banyan. But something happened that kept the whole village buzzing for months. Mr. Moi Tam, the man who had kept the temple for 40 years, died exactly 3 days after the ceremony. He passed away during a midday nap, eyes wide open, hands clutching his prayer beads tightly, like he was afraid something might pull him away. People whispered that he was the only one who had ever called the man behind the banyan by name. Once, when he was drunk at noon, he rambled, "I remember your name now. Kwang, you died in the temple well that year. No one claimed your body. So now you just stand there. Don't you?" After that year's ceremony, villagers passing by the temple all avoided looking at the banyan tree. One old man even smeared lime on the roots and tied a small talisman with red strawstring, saying it was to give him something to lean on, so he won't wander. Whether they believed or not, no one argued. I'm not telling this story to scare anyone, but if you ever visit the countryside and happen to walk past an old village temple and see a big banyan tree casting its shadow, just remember, don't stand under it. Especially, don't try counting the number of people at the ceremony. Because maybe, the first time you count 15, but the second time, you'll count 16. In my village, whenever people talk about the ancient banyan tree in front of the communal temple, they always remember two things. One is the shadowless man I told you about earlier. And the other is the ghost wedding that took place right under that tree. A wedding where no one saw the groom. And the bride had no face. It all began over 20 years ago, when I was in 9th grade. Back then, there was a girl in the village named Nu. She was petite but pretty, quick-witted, and hard-working. She sold sweet soup at the morning market and helped her mother raise pigs in the afternoon. Nu's father had died early, and it was just the two of them getting by on whatever they could. Nu was cheerful and sincere, but strangely, she turned down every suitor. There was a boy named Sang, son of Uncle Suyen, who pursued her relentlessly. He followed her everywhere, giving her snacks and fruits. But Nu just smiled and softly said, "I've already promised someone. I can't marry anyone else." When people asked, "Who did you promise?" she'd only smile and shake her head. Some said she was heartbroken. Others whispered, maybe she believed in a spirit betrothal. The night it happened was the full moon of the Ghost Festival. Mid-autumn, hot and humid, with a glowing moon lighting up the entire temple yard. Around 9 in the evening, people heard wedding drums coming from the temple. But it wasn't joyful music, it was deep and mournful. Like funeral drums. Those living near the temple, like Uncle Tam and Mr. Sao Kwang, ran out to look. And from afar, they saw a figure in red slowly walking toward the banyan tree. Strangely, there was only the bride. No family, no music, no one speaking, just an old motor cart following behind, carrying a wooden chest covered with a white cloth. The bride stopped right under the banyan tree, standing there like she was waiting for someone. After a moment, she began walking around the tree 3 times, placing her hand on the roots as if in prayer. Uncle Tam said, "My eyesight was already bad by then, but I saw it clearly. That girl was wearing a bright red wedding dress. Her head wrapped in a traditional scarf, but her face completely white. No eyes, no nose. Like a hollow paper mask." The next morning, Nu was found hanging from the kitchen beam. She still had red shoes on. On the floor was a short note written in purple ink. "I've gone to be his wife. Mama, don't be sad. Tomorrow, I'll get to wear the wedding dress I've always dreamed of." Her mother fainted on the spot. The villagers gathered, all chilled to the bone, remembering the red bride they'd seen the night before. Nu's funeral was held quickly. But from then on, anyone who passed the temple late at night claimed to see a red shadow slipping by the banyan. Some heard the clatter of wooden clogs. Others swore that during every full moon, the paper flowers left on the altar would be blown off, despite there being no wind. Old Mr. Moi Tam was still alive back then. He gathered the village boys and said, "Someone has returned to her old place. Not to harm anyone, but to keep a promise. But if anyone dares to mock her, the next wedding might come with an extra guest." Back then, we were half believing, half doubting, until something happened that made the entire village believe it was real. Boo, a local guy who'd returned from working out of town, made a joke. "I'm getting married tomorrow. Maybe I should invite the ghost bride to make it a proper pair." He said it in front of a crowd and laughed. 3 days later, on the night of his wedding ceremony, the wedding car stalled right in front of the temple. The bride, sitting inside, suddenly fainted, mumbling, "Who's calling me?" to the banyan tree. The wedding was cancelled. Boo went pale for a month, and from then on, never dared to pass the temple at night again. He moved to live with his wife in the district market and only returned during Tet and ancestral offerings. As for that banyan tree, since the ghost wedding all those years ago, the village holds a small offering there every year, right where the bride once stood. Rice, salt, white flowers, and a tiny pair of wooden clogs. No one dares to forget. One year, the new village chief didn't know the tradition and skipped the small offering. That night, the temple's back hall burned down. No one could explain why. Since then, People stopped asking, stopped questioning, they just quietly did what had always been done. I'm not telling this story to scare anyone. I'm just saying, if you ever happen to walk past an old banyan tree, especially on the ghost festival night, and see a red dress standing silently in the shadows, please don't call out, don't take pictures, don't turn around, because some promises, even when made in this world, don't always stay buried here. Noi ban muon viet them fan mo do gay to mo hoak ket video mang dam kong ki ke choyen, kiu goi ni. Min say ho tro them ngay nay. At the edge of my village, there's a hill we call Orphans Hill. It used to be a small cemetery, but the graves were later relocated, and the land was left untouched. No one dared to build a house there. The hill isn't very tall, but the trees grow thick, and if the grass goes uncut for too long, it'll reach above your knees. A few patches of eroded earth still remain, remnants from the time before the exhumations. Villagers still habitually refer to it as Ghost Hill, or the Hill of Those Who Came Before. Back then, there was an old lady named Ba Hong. She was over 70, lived alone, never married, had no children. She wasn't mentally ill, but everyone in the village said she was not like the rest. Every morning around 7, she'd pack a small meal into a bamboo basket, sometimes cold rice with a piece of braised fish, sometimes plain porridge with a sprinkle of fried shallots. She'd carry it up the hill and sit at a stone step on the highest mound, right across from an old bamboo grove. People asked her why she ate up there. She would just smile, eyes gazing far away, and say, "I'm having breakfast with a loved one." At first, everyone thought it was just an old woman's lonely imagination. But after a few months, she was still there, same time, same place, silent, never inviting anyone, eating slowly. After finishing, she'd clean up her things and quietly head down the hill. Always alone. Oot Kwong, the mischievous son of Uncle Ba, once saw her and shouted, "Mom, come look, Granny Hong's eating with a ghost today. There are 2 pairs of chopsticks." She didn't say a word. She just stood up, shaded herself with her conical hat, and walked down the hill. But from that night, Oot Kwong had a fever for 3 straight days. Delirious the whole time, mumbling, "I don't want to sit there anymore. There's no seat for me." Ba Hong never complained, never scolded. She simply came to their house, left behind a handkerchief, washed and folded, with a message: "Tell the boy, next time he goes up the hill, remember to say a prayer. Just because the land looks empty doesn't mean you can sit wherever you want." Some say they once went up the hill at noon and saw Ba Hong sitting there eating, next to a shadow. But when they looked again, she was alone. The other shadow had no body. Just a shadow. But the scariest part wasn't that. It was her final meal. That year, the monsoon came early. Ba Hong still went about her routine, same as always, until one morning, the sky overcast and wind gusting strong. She wore a worn-out wool sweater and carried her basket up the hill. Ms. Sao, who sells noodles at the market, saw her and called out, "You're still going up there for breakfast in this weather?" Ba Hong turned, smiled, and said, "Today's my farewell meal, dear." Ms. Sao laughed, thinking she was joking. No one paid much attention. By evening, when the rain began to fall, people started to realize no one had seen Ba Hong come back down. A group went up to search and found her basket on the same stone step as always. A banana leaf covered the top. Inside was a full serving of food, untouched. Next to it were her old plastic sandals and her torn hat, carefully hung on a bamboo branch. But Ba Hong was gone. The police were called. They searched through the night. By morning, they found her lying near the edge of the hill. Her body was cold, eyes closed, a peaceful smile on her lips, hands folded neatly on her chest, like she'd simply fallen asleep. Her ID was intact. No signs of injury or trauma. The doctor said, her heart stopped naturally. It's like she chose this place to go. The whole village took care of her funeral. Everyone came to send her off. Quietly. But the strangest part was, when they dug her grave at the base of the hill. Right where she'd sat every day for over a decade. They uncovered a small shard of porcelain buried in the dirt. It had faint lettering carved into it, 2 souls at peace, sharing mortal meals. People whispered that maybe she had a loved one once buried there, or perhaps a child lost during the war. No one knew. She took the secret with her. Since then, no one dares eat or drink on that hill, even though the land is open, breezy, and peaceful. Every time someone camps there or sets up a picnic, they come back saying the same thing. While I was eating, I felt like someone was sitting beside me. Some who pitched tents woke up to find a bowl of cold rice placed gently outside their tent flap, chopsticks resting neatly on top. No one knew who left it. The elders say, just leave it, don't throw it away, don't ask questions. Someone's just keeping an old habit. When I returned to the village and passed by the old hill, the grass was green. The wind still howled just like it used to. But every time I stepped near the stone where she once sat, my heart skipped a beat, like I had just entered a space where someone was quietly waiting to share a meal. Behind my village lies a vast field that used to be called Old Grave Field. It got that name because, during the war, it was once a mass burial ground, bodies buried hastily, anonymously, without markers. Later on, most of the remains were relocated to the new cemetery. But the villagers left that field untouched. No one dared to build on it, and hardly anyone ever farmed there. The grass grows head-high, and scattered throughout the field are small mounds of earth, old graves left undisturbed. People say there's one sandy grave no one dares to touch. Someone once struck it with a hoe and ended up bedridden for weeks. Completely unresponsive. No one knew why. As kids, we used to fly kites and catch crickets out there. But as we grew older, we started noticing something strange, around the middle of the month. Especially on crescent moon nights. People walking past Old Grave Field would say they heard singing. Not cheerful songs. It was a long, sorrowful melody. Like someone calling for a ferry across the river. Some brushed it off, saying, probably just some kids singing late at night. But the strange thing was, the voice was never close, never too far. It just floated across the field. If you were riding a motorbike, the faster you went, the more the singing seemed to follow you. But the moment you stopped, silence. As if it had never existed. Uncle Two-Lap, who drives a motorbike taxi at night, once shared, one night, I was taking an old lady out to the main road. As we passed the field, she suddenly muttered, "It's singing again, this voice, it's familiar." I asked, "What did you say, ma'am?" She smiled and replied, "Oh, nothing. I'm old, sometimes the wind sounds like people." But her face was pale, lips trembling. Aunt Tam, who sells Bon Lot desserts, gave a clearer account. That night, I was returning from delivering orders. It was almost 10. My bike had a flat tire, so I had to walk it. The sky was cloudy, and the crescent moon gave little light. As I reached the middle of the field, I heard a woman singing Vong Ko. The voice was heartbreaking, and the song, nobody knew it. It wasn't Tin An Ban Chu, not Lan and Deep, but something like a lullaby for someone drifting on a river. I got chills all over. Didn't dare turn around. It took everything in me to sleep that night. My grandfather, before he passed, used to sit under our porch and say, "That's the sound of someone calling the ferry." I asked, "Ferry? But Grandpa, there's no river in the middle of the field." He just chuckled and said in a low voice, "Back in the day, that field was a river. Many drowned there. Bodies were pulled ashore and buried right where they lay. The river's gone, but maybe the voices stayed." I shivered. "Why doesn't anyone tell the younger folks?" I asked. He sighed. "Not the kind of story to spread. Kids hear it, get brave, go snooping around. Sometimes they get pulled in without knowing." Years later, something happened that stirred the whole village. A group of young men threw a birthday party in the field, not deep inside. Just near the edge by the irrigation path. They brought portable speakers, sang, drank, played music till nearly midnight. Everyone was having fun. Everyone except Nyan, the quietest guy in the group, who suddenly wandered off without saying a word. When they found him, he was standing alone in the middle of the field, eyes staring blankly ahead, lips silently mouthing a tune no one else could hear. They called to him, shouted his name, but he didn't respond. Only when someone ran in and physically pulled him did he collapse, then burst into tears. He wouldn't speak. After that night, he quit school, barely talked, spent his days sitting by the window listening to Vonko. His parents took him to every spiritual healer they could find. Each one said the same thing. He's being followed by a wandering soul that hasn't moved on. An old Ba Thay from Phuoc Loc came to check. She stood in the middle of the field, said nothing, then picked up a handful of soil and scattered it into the wind. Then she said, "There's someone here waiting." A promise was made that she could sing one last time for her lover, but she was swept away before she could say goodbye. Now, anyone who walks by, sounds like him, looks like him, she follows. Her words sent chills down everyone's spine. After that, an unspoken rule formed. No walking through Old Grave Field at night. And if you must, say a prayer. And if you sing, don't sing Vonko. I'm not saying it's ghosts. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's echoes carried from far away. But one thing I know for sure, anyone who's ever walked alone through that field on a windless night, and happened to hear singing, you should keep walking. Don't stop. Don't answer. Don't try to listen closely. Because maybe, just maybe, that voice was meant for someone who died a long time ago. And you just happened to hear your name. Mr. Wah the silversmith lived in the first house at the entrance of our village. It was an old, traditional 3-room tile roof house built back in his great-grandfather's time. The roof hung low, the walls were made of oil wood, and the floor was covered in red terracotta tiles. In recent years, the paint had peeled, and mold spotted the walls, but no one dared to suggest selling or doing any major renovations. Mr. Wah would always say, "Touch one thing, another breaks, better leave it be." The house had a small attic near the ceiling, made of mixed old wood, partitioned off by a wooden screen, what my grandfather used to call a man lung. The kind of wooden panel with little cutouts shaped like cat eyes for ventilation. Back in the day, people used it to block off staircases or storage rooms. But what made people curious was that no one had ever seen inside that attic. Mr. Wah always kept it brief, just old stuff. The kids aren't allowed up there. When I was little, I used to go over and play with Kwang, Mr. Hoa's youngest son. He once told me, every time we're all in the kitchen at night, I hear footsteps on the attic floor. It's not a cat, not a rat. It sounds like a person walking, slow and careful, right on the wooden boards up there. I laughed. You're imagining things. He sighed. I'm not the only one who hears it. My mom heard it too. She once stood below and looked up, didn't say a word. That story stayed buried for a few years. Until one day, Mr. Hoa's family held the ancestral death anniversary. The altar was filled with offerings, and relatives gathered from all over. Around 7 p.m., as everyone was in the kitchen prepping dinner, we all heard footsteps, thump, 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 right above our heads. The room fell silent. Mr. Wah looked up, face calm, and quietly said, "You all eat first. I'll go check. Maybe something got up there." He climbed the attic stairs slowly. When he reached the wooden screen, he stopped, didn't go in. Everyone below held their breath. A minute later, he came back down, face pale, and whispered, "No one's there, but a chair's been moved." No one asked any more questions. That night, everyone ate in silence. No one touched the tray of bon and set to the left of the altar, the favorite treat of Mr. Hoa's late mother. A few months later, Kwang invited me to sleep over. I lay on the wooden platform in the main room, Kwang beside me. Around midnight, I woke up to a faint scraping sound. like something heavy being dragged across the wooden floor. I opened my eyes and looked toward the attic. Moonlight streamed faintly through a gap in the roof tiles. And behind the wooden screen, a shadow passed by. I held my breath, didn't scream, didn't move. The shadow wasn't clear enough to see the face. But it was definitely a grown person. Straight posture, long hair, wearing white. It moved past the screen, then stopped right in the center, turned, and looked down. I immediately shut my eyes, sweat soaking through my back. The next morning, I didn't say a word, but I swore never to sleep in that house again. Kwong didn't blame me. He just said, "I'm used to it. It doesn't do anything, just walks back and forth." When I was a kid, I once opened the attic door and saw a long white dress hanging from the ceiling beam. On the floor, right in the middle of the room, were dry, dusty footprints, not from anyone in our family. I never went back up. The villagers whispered all kinds of things. Some said it was Mr. Ho's mother coming back to visit. She had lived on that attic floor for years after her stroke left her half paralyzed. Others said she had hidden something up there, a talisman, a bundle, or maybe a secret, and couldn't rest in peace. But no one in the family ever confirmed or denied it. One time, Mr. Wah was sipping tea with my dad and quietly said, "I don't really know who it is. But once, I dreamed of my mother sitting up there, back turned, and she said, 'Don't forget I once lived here. If you clear everything out, I won't have a place to come back to.'" I woke up drenched in sweat. Since then, the attic has remained untouched. No one goes up, no one cleans. Every year, on his mother's death anniversary, Mr. Wah prepares a small tray of offerings, takes it up to the attic, then locks the door behind him. If anyone asks, he just says, "She's eaten. She doesn't like noise. I'm grown now, living on my own." But every time I return to the village and pass by the old house, looking at that moss-covered roof and weathered wooden walls, I still feel a chill. Especially when I walk underneath the attic on a day when rain is coming, because that wooden screen sometimes gently sways, even when there isn't a single gust of wind in the house. In recent years, not many people in my village keep cats anymore. Not because they're messy or too much trouble to feed, but ever since the death of Mr. Botrak, who was rumored to have been marked by a death cat. Villagers began avoiding black cats, especially the one owned by Mrs. Tu Nyan. Mrs. Tu had lived alone since she was 50. Her husband died early, and her daughter married someone far in the north, only visiting every few years. She didn't talk much, didn't socialize. She spent her days sweeping the yard, tending to pots of orchids out front. But what people remembered most about her wasn't the orchids. It was the pitch-black cat that followed her everywhere. Like a shadow. The cat's name was Tia, which didn't match its inky black fur at all. When asked, Mrs. Tu would just smirk and say, "I gave it a name that goes against its nature." Tia wasn't friendly. It never let anyone other than her touch it. Anyone who got too close would be met with arched fur, bared teeth, and a low growl, more dog than cat. Its eyes glowed yellow, like embers still burning. On bright moonlit nights, when it sat silently on her front porch staring down the alley, even the bravest villagers felt a chill. The rumors started when Mr. Botrak, who lived down the street, suffered a stroke and became bedridden. That morning, his daughter opened the front door and saw Mrs. Tu's black cat sitting silently on the porch. It didn't meow, didn't move, just sat there staring into the house. She grabbed a broom and tried to shoo it away. It didn't run, just casually walked past her and disappeared behind the fence. That afternoon, Mr. Ba died. At first, people thought it was just coincidence. But a month later, it was Mrs. Chintai's turn, the woman who sold bananas at the market. She'd caught a cold and hadn't recovered after several days of fever. That day, Mrs. Sao, the fish vendor, passed by and saw the same black cat sitting by the banana grove near Mrs. Chin's home. The moment I laid eyes on it, she said, "It looked straight back at me. Its gaze felt human, like it could see right through me. I had goosebumps all over. 2 days later, Mrs. Chin passed away. 3 incidents like that, and the whispers grew louder. Some claimed Mrs. Tu's cat was a harbinger of death, wherever it sat. Someone inside would soon die. Others said she raised a spirit cat, trained to guide souls to the other side, like a gatekeeper between the living and the dead. The superstitious even said, "That's no cat. That's a reincarnated soul come back to repay her." Mrs. Tu heard the talk, smiled faintly, and said, "You're all too superstitious. It only sits where someone is getting ready to leave. No one leads it, it just waits." I didn't really believe it. Not until something happened at Mrs. Nam Loan's house that changed my mind. She had fallen down the stairs, broken her leg, and was bedridden. The family hired someone to care for her. That morning, I stopped by my cousin's house. He lives next door, and saw the black cat sitting on Mrs. Nam's porch. I froze. It looked at me, unblinking. I told my cousin's wife. Hong, her face turned pale. "Oh God, I saw it yesterday too, but thought it had wandered off." I asked, "Do you believe the rumors?" She shook her head. "Believe or not, I wouldn't dare chase it. They say whoever chases it away, the sick one won't make it through the night." I shivered. That evening, Mrs. Nam slipped into delirium. By nightfall, she was gone. 3 times might still be coincidence. 5 or 6, that's no longer chance. Mrs. Tu continued living alone. Still fed the cat at the same hour. Still tended her orchids like nothing had happened. Villagers began keeping their distance. No one let their kids go near her yard. Some with cruel tongues muttered, "She's keeping that cat to trade for a longer life." She never responded, not even a smirk. One day, I gathered the courage to ask her directly, "Mrs. Tu, that cat, what is it really?" She looked at me for a long time, then quietly said, "It's a debt. When I was young, I found it at the old cemetery after a big storm. A whole litter had drowned. But this one was still alive, its eyes wide open, staring at me. I brought it home. Since then, I've never been sick. When my mother passed, it sat at the door all night without moving. That's just how it is. When it follows someone, it means they'll soon need a companion for the journey." I got chills, not because her story was terrifying, but because of the way she told it, so calm, so familiar, like recounting an old habit too ordinary to question. Mrs. Tu passed away one early winter morning, just as the wind changed. Her daughter arrived late, called out but no one answered. When she pushed open the door, she found her mother sitting peacefully by the family altar. Eyes closed, hands neatly folded. On her lap was the black cat. It wasn't breathing, its eyes were shut, like it had left with her. No one in the village said anything after that. They held a proper funeral for her. Someone even whispered during incense offering, "Good thing it went with her, if it had stayed," and then trailed off. Too afraid to finish. After the funeral, no one ever saw the black cat on anyone's porch again. But on crescent moon nights, those who pass by her old house say they still sometimes catch a glimpse of a small black shadow darting across the yard, then vanishing into the dark. Light as the wind, quiet as the forgotten. At the entrance of my alley, there's a small patch of empty land, about 4 square meters, nestled between 2 houses. People call it the Dragon's Back, meaning it's a spot that disrupts the Earth's energy flow. No one dares build on it, and nothing planted there ever survives. When I was little, I thought it was just too sunny for plants to grow. It wasn't until I got older that I learned the truth. That patch of land used to be the mouth of a deep mud pond, what villagers called the cold pond. Years ago, the elders filled it in with dirt to build the road. But whenever it rained hard, that spot would sink slightly. Water wouldn't drain. It stayed there like a dead puddle. My mom used to warn me, "Don't come home alone at night, especially near the alley's entrance. If there's wind, run, don't stop, don't stand still." I'd nod, but I was a kid, I wasn't scared of anything. That is, until the night I came home late. riding alone, passed that spot, and fell face first without knowing why. It was a humid night. No breeze. The air heavy. I'd been visiting a friend in the next neighborhood. As I neared the alley, a strange gust of wind picked up. It wasn't strong, but it was odd. It blew backward, unevenly, like someone was breathing right by my ear. I squinted, lowered my head, and kept going. Then, my handlebars locked up. The bike jolted, and I went down. I had no idea what had happened. All I knew was my left wrist stung like something had grabbed it. A neighbor ran out to help me. I sat up, dazed, then stared in shock at the long bruise wrapping around my wrist, like a handprint. Not just a scrape, an actual handprint. 5 fingers clear as day. What chilled me more was when Mrs. Sow, the lady next door, came rushing out and asked, "Did you fall right where the old pond used to be?" I nodded. Her face went serious. "Then something pulled you." I thought she was just being dramatic. But when I got home and told my mom, she stayed quiet for a moment, then asked, "When you fell, did you hear anything?" I hesitated. I heard this muffled sound coming from the ground, like someone crying softly. She didn't say another word. She lit an incense stick, walked to the edge of the alley, planted it in the ground at that exact spot, and whispered a prayer. When she came back, she only said, "Next time you hear strange wind, don't keep going, take a different route." I got better in a few days, but I never forgot how that moment felt. Since then, I started paying attention. It doesn't happen every day, but whenever the wind shows up, out of season, out of nowhere, brushing right across your face, something happens. One time it was an old lady in the back alley who collapsed for no reason. Another time it was a gardener uncle who fell down the stairs. The worst case was the woman living in the house closest to that patch. She was biking home late after work. Right as she neared that strip of land, her bike's wheels locked up and she crashed to the ground. No bruises, no scratches, but after that night, she lost her voice. Doctors couldn't explain it. Her family took her to a spiritual healer. The healer examined her and said, "Someone drowned here long ago. They were never recovered." When the wind rises, it means they're searching for someone to take their place. The hair on my neck stood up. No one could prove it true or false. But after that, a quiet rule spread among us. If the wind at the alley's entrance brushes across your forehead, go the long way. If it spins backward, it means a hand's reaching up from the ground. There's one story I'll never forget. There was a little boy in our neighborhood, the son of a construction worker. About 8 years old, he often played soccer outside his house. During the day, it was fine, but one twilight evening, when the wind picked up, his ball bounced straight into the empty patch. He chased after it. Barely 2 steps in, he tripped and screamed. Adults rushed over. He was sobbing. Something grabbed my leg. Everyone who heard it felt a chill. His leg had a long bruise, like something had squeezed it tight. From then on, no one let their kids play near that spot again. Someone tried to fence it off, but the moment they brought the bamboo stakes, the sky turned black, and rain poured down like buckets. 3 attempts, 3 storms. Eventually, they gave up. Mrs. Tam, the oldest person in our neighborhood, said outright, "That land is meant to stay empty. It's not abandoned, it's occupied. They don't like being disturbed." Every year on the Ghost Festival, villagers light a single incense stick there. No ceremony, no offerings, just the incense. And strangely, not once has the incense failed to burn all the way down. I'm grown now, have a house of my own, but every time I come back and pass that alley, I never look toward the empty patch. Especially on overcast days when the wind picks up, I just pedal faster, and sometimes, my heart races, not from fear, but from the feeling that, at that exact moment, someone is gently tugging at my pants leg, as if to ask, "Where are you going? Can't you stay just a little while?" In my village, there has long been a narrow dirt path that leads to the old cemetery. As kids used to call it, the Lonesome Grave Road. The path is tight, flanked by rows of old bamboo trees, their fallen leaves blanketing the ground. On sunny days, it's nothing unusual, but when the sky is overcast, or after a rain, the path turns muddy and damp, and the wind slipping through the bamboo sounds like someone sighing. The elders often warned, don't take that path after dusk. If you must, walk steadily, don't run, don't call out to anyone, and never look behind you. When I was little, I didn't understand. I once asked my grandma, "Why is that, Grandma?" She slowly replied, "Because that path isn't meant for the living to walk alone." The strange thing happened when I was in 11th grade. Back then, I often went to my friend Man's house to study. He lived at the edge of the village, and to get home quickly, I had to pass through the lonesome grave road. I'd heard plenty of stories, but in recent years, no one had mentioned anything spooky, so I never gave it much thought. Whenever I came home late, I just kept my head down, pedaled fast, and got through it, until one drizzly night, when I stayed later than usual because of a blackout. Around 10 o'clock, I was riding my bike along that path. The middle stretch is where the bamboo leaves pile thickest, and the mud gets slick, so I had to get off and walk. While walking, I noticed someone ahead of me, walking in the same direction. Tall figure, wearing a dark brown coarse shirt, a conical hat pulled low, carrying a round bundle on the back. At first glance, I thought it was just someone returning from the fields. I followed about a few meters behind, meaning to greet them politely. But before I could speak, something felt off. That person walked slowly, steadily, but even after walking for nearly 3 minutes, I didn't get any closer. It was like no matter how many steps I took, they took the exact same number. The path was narrow, and they walked right in the center. I didn't dare pass. I slowed down, pulled out my phone, and switched on the flashlight. As the beam touched the bundle on the figure's back, I froze. It wasn't a bundle. It was a human head, wrapped in a white cloth, with a darkened forehead showing. Eyes closed, face calm, like sleeping. I turned the light off instantly. My heart was pounding. Swallowed hard, I turned my bike around, planning to go back to Man's house. But just as I turned the handlebars, I heard a faint dragging sound behind me. I spun around, and saw nothing. The path was empty. No person, no shadow, no footprints. When I got home, I was cold all over. My mom asked why I was soaked in sweat. I told her half the story. She didn't say anything, just lit incense and went outside to place a long stick of incense at the end of the alley. She stood there for a while, praying softly. When she came back, she simply said, "If you ever hear strange wind again, don't keep going, take a different path." A few days later, there was a funeral in the village. It was Mr. Hung, the man who used to collect scrap metal near the old cemetery. He died of pneumonia, alone, and no one noticed until the smell gave him away. He was often seen wearing a coarse brown shirt, slowly walking that same path with a sack on his back. But the one I saw that night, I'm sure it wasn't him. The figure was larger, walked silently, cast no shadow, carried no soul. Since then, I've never taken that path at night again. When people ask if I'm scared, I say it's not about fear. It's about knowing you shouldn't. Some roads, during the day, are for the living, but at night, they belong to someone else. My grandfather used to say, in the old days, every funeral passed down that path to reach the cemetery. Not because it was shorter, but because the dead had to leave by the old route. No one's done that in decades. That path's gone cold, the ground's damp. If a soul doesn't know the way back, they stay, walking back and forth forever. Mrs. Sao, who sells at the district market, once biked home late. The next morning, she looked pale as chalk. When asked what happened, she just said, "I heard footsteps behind me, dragging footsteps, but no one was there." She had to burn incense and pray for 3 days before the pressure in her chest went away. An old man once walked through that path at dusk and saw someone walking the other way, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, holding a bamboo switch. The old man stepped aside to let them pass. The figure brushed right past, and was ice cold. When he turned around, no one there. But on the dirt path were long, wet sandal prints stretching more than 10 meters. I don't know how much of it is real, how much is imagination, but ever since I saw the one carrying the bundle, there's a question that's always lingered in the back of my mind. A question I never dare say out loud. If that night I tried to walk past them, would I have been able to turn back? New Year's Eve in the countryside is always strangely quiet. There are no fireworks, no flashing lights, just dogs barking in the distance, wind whistling past old tiled roofs, chickens murmuring in their sleep, and the smoky scent of incense drifting from altars through half-open wooden windows along the dirt paths. For people in my village, New Year's Eve isn't just the changing of a year. It's the thinnest moment between the world of the living and the dead. A time when the living call out in prayer, and the departed quietly return. Mrs. Nam Nu's house was at the far end of the village. Her garden wide and lush, especially the banana grove behind the kitchen, where the leaves grew as large as floor mats. At night, the wind passing through them sounded like whispers. Mrs. Nam lived with her granddaughter, little Hao, 18 years old, studying in the town, home for Tet. They both lived quiet, kind lives. No one disliked them, no one gossiped. It happened that New Year's Eve, I was home, lit incense, then walked around the village to wish people a Happy New Year. Just before midnight, passing by Mrs. Nam's house, I heard Hao crying, screaming. A few of us rushed over. She stood in the yard, hair disheveled, face pale, holding a half-burnt incense stick, voice trembling. Someone was behind the banana trees, talking to me, called my name exactly. Mrs. Nam pulled her inside. Her face was drained of color. Outside, people murmured, who would be at the banana grove at that hour? I felt a chill down my spine. The next day, I went to ask. Hao was still shaking, told me. After I finished at the altar, Grandma told me to bring incense to the banana grove too. She said that spot was where the placenta of my baby sibling was buried after they passed away at birth. I went out, bent down to place the incense, then heard a voice behind me. Soft as the wind. How, it's been so long. I asked, did you see anything? She shook her head. I didn't dare turn around, but I felt a cold breath right behind me, and a rasping breath in my ear. Like someone very ill. I asked, and then? She whispered. I ran, but just before I did, it felt like someone tugged gently at my shirt, a wet hand, cold as ice. I froze. I knew that banana grove well, thick leaves hanging low to the ground. When the wind blew, it often sounded like someone shuffling through the brush. But I never expected something like this. A few days later, Hao fell ill with a lingering fever. No diagnosis. At night, she mumbled in her sleep. Call me again? I heard you. I remember. Mrs. Nam, frightened, went to find old Mr. Baikam, who performed rituals in the village. He came, lit incense, stood quietly behind the house for a while, then returned and said flatly, that place isn't clean. Someone passed there, but no one remembers them. They cling to the buried placenta to stay. Now they sense a living presence and want to be remembered. Not evil, just not at peace. He showed them how to set up a small altar in the garden and offer incense with a prayer. Hao gradually recovered, but never slept alone again. One time during dinner, she said, I still hear that voice whenever the moon is crescent. Soft, but always calls me by name. Someone asked why Mrs. Nam didn't just cut down the banana grove. She only sighed. The placenta was buried there, how can we move it? Just leave it be. Offerings keep things calm. From then on, villagers walking by her house, especially at night, chose the long way around. No one dared pass close to the banana trees. One person said, I walked by and saw someone standing in the shadows, long hair. Head bowed, not moving at all. I didn't ask further. I just knew, from that New Year's Eve on, I would never light incense near banana trees again. Especially not when there's wind. This year, on New Year's Eve, I stood in the yard, watching the sky thick with mist. Memories returned, old stories, forgotten faces, shadows that only appear after dark. And strangely, I felt at peace, not because I was no longer afraid, but because I finally understood. Some stories aren't meant to scare, they're meant to remind. Remind us that in this life, there are whispers you can only hear when your heart is still enough to listen. If you've stayed with me this far, you probably have a place like that in your memory too. A place where figures move slowly through the night. Where names are called but no one answers. Where paths exist that you only dare walk while the sun is still out. Thank you for joining me in this story from the darkness within my village, not told to frighten, but to remind us that some things we cannot see still deserve our respect. If you enjoy this style of grounded, rural storytelling, with quiet chills and deep emotion, don't forget to subscribe to Bong Toi Trong Dam, so you won't miss the next shiver-inducing tale. Until next time, on another quiet night.